again. You've got to go back to chapter 1. The Jewish people were enslaved to the Egyptians. They had lived there for 400 years. The Pharaoh, king of Egypt, was getting worried because the Jewish people kept on multiplying and prospering and growing. And so what he had to do is he had to try to control the population. And he did it 3 ways. Number 1, he forced heavy, back-breaking labor on the Jewish people. I mean, it was back-breaking labor. And yet we read in Exodus chapter 1 that they continued to multiply. They continued to grow. And so he had to come up with a second plan. And the second plan was he wanted to take the Hebrew midwives. And when the Hebrew midwives would assist in birth, if it was a Jewish child, a Hebrew male, if the male was born, kill that child. If it was a female, that's fine, let it live. Okay? Well, the Hebrew midwives, in an act of what we call civil disobedience, disobeyed Pharaoh, king of Egypt, because they feared God. But Pharaoh wasn't done yet. And so the third solution, you'll read it at the last verse of chapter 1, it says, you take all the male children, you Egyptians, if you see a Hebrew male child, I want you to throw that child into the river Nile and drown that child. You know what we call that today? Yeah. Or genocide. You ever hear that term? Genocide? Now, some of you, maybe you haven't heard that before, and you're probably thinking, oh, that didn't really happen, did it? Well, I got to tell you that this is not a fairy tale. This is cold, hard history. And I want you to feel the force of that for a moment, because this kind of activity has not been unusual activity in the course of history. Where there have been tyrants and there have been governments who have wanted to control the population of his people. Let me tell you about a man by the name of Pol Pot. Back in our church in Texas, we had a husband and wife and a sister and 2 children. They were refugees from Cambodia. Okay? After we left Vietnam, a group called the Khmer Rouge came in, the communists. His name was Pol Pot. And he killed anywhere, it's estimated from 1.7 to 2.5 million Cambodians. Because he wanted to control the population. This family that we had in our church, they escaped 24 hours on foot all night until they finally got to a refugee camp in Thailand. They were baptized in the Philippine River, except for one. I baptized one of them. It was a systematic genocide. In the 1990s, the Balkan states, the Croatian people, the Serbian people, many people fleeing from that country. If you were a non-Serb, you would have been targeted. Many people extinguished, wiped out, because they wanted to ethnically cleanse a certain group of people from that nation. Now, you and I probably know this, but it happens still today in probably not as brutal a fashion. But in China, there is a forced law that you can only have one child. If you have more than one child, you have to abort that child. That is controlling a population of people. And what Pharaoh is trying to do is control the population of the Jewish people. So why do you think they hid Moses for 3 months? Miriam and Aaron were already born. They're fine. But Moses is fair game. they drowned him. You can bet. You know why they hid him for 3 months, don't you?